Ruchim Aboim B'Shem Ergin Shir Torah Moses Boston. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's shir. All the men here in the main base medrash, all the women upstairs and downstairs, everyone listening in through the phone system and tuning in through the live broadcast. Ruchim Aboim. As you see from the paperwork throughout the shul, Ergin Shir Torah's annual dinner is coming up next week. Still chaparine and put in an ad. And Chaved Rabbanim, whose shirim you've enjoyed, in honor of Yaskonim of Ergin Shir Torah, or to have a chelik in the Abotzas Torah of Ergin Shir Torah worldwide throughout the year. Call Ergin Shir Torah at 718-851-8651 or email tapecenter@yeshivanet.com to have this great schus, or to have the equally great schus of sponsoring one of the remaining shiurim. Tonight's shir is sponsored Lili Nishmas Rav Chaim Yitzchak ben Rav Israel Rav Shalom and Lili Nishmas Aisha Nomi Bas Rav Gedalia, Lili Nishmas Rav Gedalia Aryeh, Lili Nishmas Chava Bas Rav Baron Yosef. It's also sponsored. I'd like to thank Mr. and Mrs. Benjamin Winkler for sponsoring tonight's shir. Lili Nishmas Ochiv Rav Mordechai Olav Shalom ben Yerucham Fischel Sein Gesund. Tonight we have the cover to have with us once again noted speaker and author Rabbi Nachman Seltzer, who will speak to us on the topic of the first theme party ever. It's my cover to call in Rabbi Seltzer for tonight's drasha.
Thank you very much. It's a big pleasure to be back here. Ergin Shir Torah. Thank you for having me. Okay, so the title was a little cryptic. I understand. I've gotten this from a few different directions. And as the night goes on, I think everybody will understand what I mean by the first theme party. Okay, but I do want to start with a few interesting things which I've heard recently. When I'm traveling, when I go places, when I'm home also, people reach out and tell me interesting nekudas from their lives. And Baruch Hashem, recently I've heard a number of interesting things, which I would like to start off tonight's class with. I'm going to bring out the point of going the extra step, whether it's between Benam L'Chaveroi, if it's between Hashem and us, or it's Eretz Yisrael. We're going to develop it. We're going to develop the theme. So step number one, I was in Baltimore recently. I was speaking in Baltimore. I was taken around by one of the biggest askanim of Baltimore, is Mr. Frank Storch, the very chosh v'yid. His entire kavana is shmira of Klal Yisrael, where everybody's thinking about the Sima Shas. Mr. Frank Storch is thinking about how he's going to protect Klal Yisrael, the Sima Shas, and all the different interesting security angles. Baruch Hashem, Klal Yisrael is full of so many different people with different kind of minds, and each person focuses on his nekuda. I'll go upon him. We were going through Baltimore, and we ran into two ladies who were the principals of a school in Crown Heights. And Mr. Storch invited them to his house, Malava Malka, to bring their school of girls who are interesting backgrounds from Crown Heights, very special school, and they're coming to Baltimore for Shabbos. And he invited them to come he made him Lava Malka in his house. Now, he has a house with a shul on the property. So I'm sitting in his house, Motzei Shabbos, after a whole very nice Shabbos, spoken in different places, and I'm sitting there like a few minutes before the speech. In walks a friend of mine from Beit Shemesh. His name is Rabbi Yaakov Rabin. He's a Rosh Kollel. He has a Kollel in Yerushalayim. And he says, I have to tell you a story. It just happened in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so I want you to understand statistically what's going on over here. Two people live in Beit Shemesh, meet in a house in Baltimore about a person, a story that happened to a guy in Akko for a group of girls who came from Crown Heights. You know, this is statistically what happened over here in order for this thing to all come together. It was a very beautiful thing. I'll go upon him. He tells me this story, and I go in to speak to these girls, and I said, I don't know, clearly you have to hear this story for whatever reason. I don't know why, but clearly you have to hear this. So I will start with this story. There's a younger man in Eretz Yerushalayim who went through a pretty tough divorce, and he was still not letting it get him down. He was still learning. He was steiging away. It was hard for him. He was going through a certain, yisurim. I'm sure both sides were. The Maisa, he's learning. He's doing his thing. One day his father calls him up. He says, listen, do me a favor. I want to go visit my sister's coming from America to Akko. She's staying in Akko. Please drive me to Akko to visit my sister. So he makes a cheshbon to himself, and he says, it's a drive of 3 hours. The visit's going to take at least 2 hours. The drive back is 3 hours. We're talking about a good 8-hour trek. It's very hard to do this, but he said to himself, I could turn my father down. There's very interesting. When I heard this story 2 days before, somebody called me from Eretz Yisrael to America, tracked me down to tell me that they feel I should write a book about Kabbalah Zricha V'Simecha. 2 days later, I hear this story. Anyway, stop. Side point. I'll go upon him. So what happens? He says to himself, Kabbalah Zricha V'Simecha, I'm going to take my father to Akko. So he drives to Akko. Takes him 3 hours. He parks his car. Now in Eretz Yisrael, the way it works, I'm sure most of you have been in Eretz Yisrael, legally you're allowed to park, and it's a blue spot. Blue and white, that's where you're allowed to park. Red and white, you're not allowed to park. Now this guy, he finds a spot, blue and white, he parks, very nice. He thought it's a legal spot, and he goes in with his father to visit his aunt. The visit goes well. 2 hours later, it's almost 11 o'clock, and they go out of the house to go to the car. And he gets to the car, he sees a cop is there, he's giving him a ticket. He doesn't understand why. So he goes over to the cop and he says to him, he says, Chaver sheli, he says, very friendly, Chaver sheli, my friend, why are you giving me a ticket? I'm parked in the blue and the white. It's very good, very patriotic. What's wrong? Why are you giving me a ticket? So the cop says to him, you don't understand, you went 6 inches into the red. 6 inches, you're extending. So the guy's at Talmud Chacham, he says, Chaver sheli, he says, there's a din, ruvay kekuloi. If the majority is in the right spot, majority is legal, we should be vatal. The 6 inches should be bottled to the rest of the car. So the cop is also, he's not from, but he's a Talmud Chacham. So the cop says to him, oh, so you're saying like this. So if I shave off the first 6 inches of the car, you're good to go? Clearly not. Obviously it's not a gay. Your argument's not a gay. What he was really saying was, it's a chatich, the first beginning of the car, it's a chatich really skabed boy. That's what the cop was really saying. So it was, you have this machlokes over here, if you should say it's batal, or you should say, And the cop said, I'm very sorry, I have to give you a ticket. Very sorry. Ticket how much? 500 shekel. Guy's like, I don't understand. 500 shekel? That's a big ticket. Exactly. 500 shekel, how could that be? It's lo yitachen. And especially, and what's my reward? A ticket, 500 shekel ticket, that doesn't make sense. So he has no choice. He takes the ticket. The next day he pays the ticket, and he goes on with his life. The next week, the younger man gets a letter in the mail from the courts. He opens it up, and he looks at the letter, and it says, your ex-wife complained that you came to the house and you wouldn't leave, and they told you to leave, and they this and that, a whole long thing, which never happened. He's looking at the letter. He says, this is crazy. It's never happened. What am I going to do? The lawyer sent a letter. What am I going to do? And he's looking at the date. He says, wait a second. I have proof this has never happened. I was in Akko that night. It can't be. Oh, very good. So he takes this ticket. Off he goes the next day to the courthouse in Yerushalayim. And he asks to see if he can see the judge. He comes into the judge. He says, Adoni HaShofet. He says, I was only supposed to come to the courthouse really in a few weeks, but there's been a travesty of justice over here. We need to actually set the record straight. So the judge says, what are you talking about? He says, look here. See, this ticket says that this court thing, this claim over here says I came on this and this date and I was doing this and this thing, but it's not true and it can't be true because on that and that date I was in Akko. So the judge is also a Talmud Chacham. The judge says, wait, he says, you're making a good argument, and I do have proof your car was in Akko, but there's no proof you were in Akko. Maybe somebody drove your car. So the guy says, you're right, that's a good point, a fair point. However, I had a whole conversation with the policeman, l'chayra, he would remember me. So the judge says, if that's the case, I'm going to invite the policeman down to Yerushalayim from Akko. When I say invite, I don't mean invite. We're going to bring him down here, and if he remembers you, good. I'll tell you my name, you're off the hook. And if he doesn't remember you, you're in trouble. So let's see. Okay, the next day, he goes back to the court, and the policeman from Akko is there, and the judge says to the policeman from Akko, do you remember this man? And he's looking at him, and he's looking at him, and he's looking at him, and he breaks out into a big smile, and he says, Chaver sheli, he says to him, Rubai kekuloi. That's what happened. Rubai kekuloi. So the judge got all excited, and the judge says, okay, I see you telling the truth. Off you go. And the lawyer's in big trouble for lying like this. And so, a few weeks later, our hero gets another letter in the mail, and he opens it up, and it's from the law firm that made an erroneous claim, which the judge threatened to disbar him because of, and there was a check of compensation for 300,000 shekel in the envelope. 300,000 shekel. So he was thinking to himself, it was like, you're all worried about your 500 shekel you're paying. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, don't worry so much. Hashem is on your side. Al Kapanim, I said to myself, this is a very interesting thing. To go the extra step for the other person. Let's continue. Let's take it to the next level. Okay? That was step one. So remember, very nice. Okay. So I'm on the bus, the Monsey bus, going into Brooklyn. And 2 days later, after I heard this story, and I get a phone call. There's a person tracking me down from 5 towns. He wants to tell me a story. Okay. So what's the story? It's a beautiful story. I mamish hold it a story very, very much. It teaches tremendous yesaidos in many, many areas. So what's the story? He says, I have children living in Arizona. And one of them was making a bar mitzvah. So we went down to Arizona. My wife and I went to Arizona for Shabbos. Now, he says to me, I'm not Hasidish, but I have a minhag of wearing big day Hasidus, bekesha, my tzitzis over my shirt on Shabbos. When we get to Arizona, my wife says to me, listen, nobody wears a bekesha in Arizona, so do me a favor, don't wear the bekesha in Arizona. So I said to her, listen, I hear you, mommy, I hear you, and I'm willing to take one for the team over here, but I'm going to still wear the tzitzis. So we'll make a pshara. I'm not going to wear the bekesha, but I'm going to wear the tzitzis over my shirt. So he said, okay. Now, he's a guy who likes getting ready for Shabbos early, and he's sitting there in his son's house a few hours before Shabbos, and he's all ready for Shabbos, the tzitzis, very nice, his kugel and his mavasedra. And then his son, one of his other sons, calls him up. He says, listen, Ta, I need a favor. He says, what do you need? He says, I need to return my rental car to the rental car place. It's about 5 miles away. You please drive with me, and then you'll take me back to here. He said, listen, he said, Dovi, I'm ready for Shabbos. I'm all dressed for Shabbos, and I really don't like going anywhere Shabbos. Shabbos. He says, Ta, I need your help. Now, the way it works, when anyone asks us for something which we don't want to do, we're okay with saying no, but when it's our son, it's very hard to say no to the son. It's very hard. He says, I need you to do it. It's very hard. So he says, okay, he says, come soon. I don't want now, let's do it now. He says, I'm going to come as soon as I can. The Maisi shows up about an hour and a half before Shabbos. He says, okay, it's 5 miles away. It's not so far. So they drive to return the rental car. They return the rental car, and now they're driving back to the house. About an hour before Shabbos, they're driving. There's a lot of traffic on the road. A lot of traffic. He feels all nervous. It isn't have Shabbos. If you're driving, the little hand is just clicking around over there, and your heart is just beating faster and faster. Anyone who's ever been stuck on the road on an Erev Shabbos, is a terrible, terrible feeling. I'm going to go off topic here for a second. I don't know if any of you read the book I came out with recently, Encounters with Greatness, about Daniel Yaakov Travis. And he writes in the book, how he told me how when he was a bacher, just becoming from, and he went to Brooklyn for Shabbos, and he got stuck, and the train broke down Erev Shabbos, and he was mamish seeing a situation where the train is mamish breaking down, and he's waiting, and it's like almost Shabbos. And you can imagine, for a regular person, for a guy who, any person, but for a guy who's a fresh Baal Tshuva, you can imagine what it was like for him. He didn't know what to do with himself. He's thinking, should I take the emergency thing and break through the window of the train and jump off the track? What do you do? But finally, the train started going again, and I dropped him off in Brooklyn. Now it's 2 minutes before Shabbos. He doesn't know what to do. He has a bag of money. What's he going to do? So he gets off the train, he looks, and he sees a sign. It says Tony's Bowling Alley. So he goes to Tony's Bowling Alley, and he says, comes in, he hears the sound of the pins. He had this, very nice, a smell of the bowling alley, and he goes and he says, where's Tony? So I bring Tony. He says, Tony, listen, I'm a religious Jew, and I need a place to store my belongings. The Sabbath is coming in right now. Can I please leave this bag? I have money, or can I leave it with you? And Tony says to him, listen, I'm happy to do you a favor, but I'm not taking any responsibility. No cries. Shem Echinim, Tony says. Okay, he didn't say to. But anyway, yeah, you get the idea. Okay, so he says, that's fine. I have no better choice. That Tony takes him into the office and he leaves the bag. He says, leave it over here. And he says, I'm going to come back Motzei Shabbos. And Motzei Shabbos, Daniel Yaakov Shabbos, the Bacher, he comes back to the bowling alley. He tells me, I walk in there, the place is a shambles. The glass where they keep the trophies is broken. The machines were on their sides, bowling balls everywhere. And I said, the lights were dim. And I saw Tony walking around in the wreckage. And I said, Tony, what happened? He said, they broke in Friday night and they destroyed my place. And he takes me into the office and he says to me, I want to show you something. And in the office was my bag. He said, the only one thing in the whole bowling alley that wasn't touched was your bag, he said. And the money is left. Nobody touched it. You have a great God, he said to him. That was Rabbi Nachman Seltzer's introduction to being a Yid. I'll come on side point. Okay. Anyways, so our friend from the 5 towns is on the highway in Arizona, and it's Mamash Omer Shabbos. And then he gets a flat tire, and he pulls off the road into a residential block in Arizona, middle America. They're all sitting out on the porches, very geschmack. And he pulls to the side, and he says, what are we going to do? We got about 4.5 miles to go till we get home. What are we going to do? He doesn't have a phone. He's ready for Shabbos. He says to his son, you have a phone? He says, I do have a phone, but it's dead. So you have to recharge it. So he charges. Like, it never felt so long to recharge a phone. Every second, finally, it recharges, and they call the house. Nobody answers. They're probably taking pictures in the backyard. Garnish. He says, okay, what are we going to do? All right, I see a family across the street. The McCarthys are sitting across the street. They're going to go over and ask them if he can get a ride. So he crosses over the street. The McCarthys are sitting on their porch. He says, hello, how you doing? My name is so-and-so. I live here and here, but I'm stuck, and the Sabbath is coming. Would you be able, for pay, to drive me 4.5 miles to the synagogue? So Mr. McCarthy says to him, I'd love to help you. We are also God-fearing people. However, my son has to get to Little League and my daughter has to get to ballet camp, and I can't take you. I'm very sorry. He goes back to the car, and then another car pulls up across the street next to them, and he goes over and he says to the people, would you do me a favor and please explains to them the same situation. And they say, we really want to help you, but our kid has to go to space camp, and the other kid has to go to buy corn chips, and it's Pasha not Negea. We want to help you, but we can't. So he's stuck there. And he says to his son, we have no choice. We're going to leave the keys under the wheel, and we're going to just walk to shul, 4.5 miles. What are you going to do? As he's standing there, about to walk away, a little compact car pulls up next to them. And there's an African-American couple sitting in the front seat, the little baby in the back seat, and the window goes down, and the driver looks at this Yid, and he says to him, what are you doing here so close to Shabbos, he says. True story. So the guy's looking at it like he doesn't understand. He says, what are you talking about? How do you even know about this? He says, I know. I go to Chabad. I helped them out. I know. He says, how'd you know I was Jewish? He says, well, you're wearing the big tzitzis on your shirt, he says. I know. He says, what are you doing here? He says, well, my car broke down. I got, He says, I'm going to drive you to shul. So the guy gets out and he takes all the stuff in the back seat. He puts it in the trunk. He says, get in the car. He gets in the car and he sees the guy's Rebbitzin is all excited also. It's like sometimes, a guy wants to do chesed, but the wife's not into it. Here, they're both very into it. He says to the Rebbitzin, you have a husband, Mamash Tzaddik. He says, it's a beautiful thing. Both of you doing chesed. It's very nice. She's like, yeah, we're very happy with chesed. So he drive him to the shul and he gets there. Walks in as the Chazan is saying, Tilas Hashem Yidaber Pi. He walks in, Mamash right in time for Mincha. It's a beautiful Shabbos. You can imagine the Hoibin of Shabbos. He made it just in time. And Motzei Shabbos, he goes back to take care of the car, and he goes back to that block in the residential neighborhood, and he's standing there and he's thinking to himself, is my friend, the African American guy, is he going to come by and take me and maybe he'll say hello? Am I going to see him again? He's there 5 minutes, and the guy pulls up. He says, how was Shabbos? He says, Shabbos is great, thank you so much. And they have a little shmooze. And then he says to the guy, he says, he becomes serious, and he says, I want to tell you something. You don't know what you did for me. And the African American looks at him and he goes, no, you don't know what you did for me. Now, I don't know what he meant by that, but I could tell you that he was talking the truth. Because this guy has no chance of keeping Shabbos. can't keep Shabbos. But he was goyrem that a Yid kept Shabbos. You know what schar he has in Shemayim because he was goyrem such a thing? You understand? It's mamash. And they say in Eretz Yisrael, hafuch al hafuch. It's mamash the opposite. Here, you think he's doing you a favor. You're doing him the greatest favor because he brought you to shul in time for Shabbos. It made a tremendous impression on this person. You don't know what you did for me. No, you don't know what you did for me. You understand? This is really the way we should look at every interaction we have with a person in life. A Rebbe thinks he's teaching his classroom, but really the kids are allowing him to teach Torah. A person comes to you, give tzedakah, you give him tzedakah, you're helping him out. No, he's giving you money for the next world. Every interaction we have should be looked at through the prism of, no, you don't know what you're doing for me. It's an unbelievable yesod. I'm asking. Okay. So listen to this. 2 weeks later, he's back in Brooklyn. He's driving in Brooklyn from the 5 towns, and he's parked on the side of the road, and he hears a knock on the window. He's busy in his car doing something, and there's a knock on the window. He looks up, and there's one of Barbach's finest standing there. I didn't mean the police, but one of the guys there, usually, wants tzedakah. And he makes the worldwide gesture, the gesture. Anyways, the guy's not impressed, and he knocks on the window again. I don't have. Chobnisht. Again, he knocks on the window. He rolls down the window and goes, what do you want? He says, listen, could you do me a favor? I can't walk. He looks out the window. He sees the guy Taka can't walk. He says, could you drive me to Shoyim Shabbos? And he remembers an Erev Shabbos in Arizona a few weeks before. And I needed a ride. He says, for sure, jump in the car. And the guy gets in the car and he drives it to Shoyim Shabbos. And he drops him off. And the guy looks at him and he says to him, you don't know what you did for me. And he looks back at him and he says, no, you don't know what you did to me. You don't know what you did for me. And I'm telling you, Rabbi Sai, this is mamash a yesod for life. In every interaction, it's mamash the opposite. We always think like we're doing, it's who says? Who says we're the one? Maybe the other person's mamash the one doing it. It's such a tremendous yesod. So, that was the introduction to where we're going to right now. And we start off with the biggest theme, the first original theme party in history, and what are we talking about? So in order to understand this, we have an introduction to the Yeshir, to the Yesod, with the 6-Day War. In the 6-Day War, Eretz Yisrael was very scared, the country was very scared that they were going to be overtaken by all the countries wanted to destroy every last Jew. And within a very short time, there was a tremendous miracle. Some say within the first 7 minutes of the war, when Eretz Yisrael and the Israeli Air Force managed to destroy the planes of almost the entire Egyptian Air Force in 7 minutes, however you want to look at it, tremendous, tremendous nisa. And the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, the guy was Abba Eben. And Abba Eben was the ambassador. And at one point during the war, Rav Gifter, Zechor Levracha, sent a letter to Abba Eben, and he said to him, I don't understand why you're not taking this opportunity where the whole world is looking at what's going on. Everybody wants to hear what you have to say. To say thank you to the Rabbeinu Shalom. He responds, it's the policy of the state of Israel never to mention this in public. We don't talk about this in public. On the other hand, let's go back 100 years ago to Yerushalayim, to Rav Zonenfeld, the Rav of Yerushalayim. Mamish the opposite approach. What am I talking about? So back then, the Yidden of Yerushalayim hear that there's going to be a new British High Commissioner coming to Eretz Yisrael. And he happens to be even from, I don't know how from he was from, Sir Herbert Samuels was from. And they're excited about this. Maybe he's going to understand them better. So, he comes to Eretz Yisrael, he settles into his official residence, and at some point, the British High Commissioner wants to meet with the different leaders of the religious communities in Eretz Yisrael. So he has his people contact. He meets with the Catholic Church, with the Greek Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church, the Ethiopian Church, with the Muslims, and after he meets with everybody, he wants to meet with the chief rabbi. So he has his people contact the Volachs to ask Rav Zonenfeld, Chaim Zonenfeld, if he can meet with them. So they come to him and they say, Rabbeinu, the British High Commissioner wants to meet with you. He says, okay, you can come, no problem. They say, Rabbeinu, how do we say this politely? Your house, not so nice. Maybe we can move you for the visit. He said, what? I invited him. He invited himself. If he invited himself, let him come to my house. This is my house. They said, okay, but you're like all the way down in the basement of the Charva. We should move up to the top floor. He said, I live in the basement. That's where I live. They said, okay, but can we get some new furniture? He said, why? This is my house. Why do I need new furniture? They said, can we at least put a new tablecloth on the table? He said, that you can do. Vayhi Hayom comes the day of the visit, and the British High Commissioner was a very tall man. Comes to the house, and he has to crouch down to go down the stairs to get into the home of Yosef Chaim Zanov, the palatial home of Yosef Chaim Zanov, and he crouches down and he gets into the house, and Rabbi Yosef Chaim offers him a chair. And I heard this from his great-grandson. He told me that the chair my grandfather offered was a chair wicker. It had these little holes in it. You know those chairs with little holes? So when the British High Commissioner sat down on the chair, suddenly the whole thing collapsed and he fell on the floor. And he fell. You can imagine the British High Commissioner fell on the floor. It's like, I'm not sure what the equivalent would be. Maybe the Speaker of the House comes to you and he collapses on the floor. And Rabbi Yosef Chaim said to him, he said, you know, when Yaakov Avinu came to Har Moriah, so we know that he gathered together 12 stones around his head for protection. And as legend has it, they all wanted to have the head of the tzaddik on them, so they all became one stone. So he said, here too, all the holes wanted to have the honor of you sitting, so they became one big hole, and that's what happened. So the British High Commissioner looks at Yosef Chaim and he says to him, Rabbi, couldn't you have found a less fancy home to live in? I mean, this place is just such a splendid edifice. So Yosef Chaim walks him to the window and he says, look out the window. He says, if there wasn't, it used to be, you could look straight out and you could see Har Habayis. So many years ago, a few thousand years ago, this was the house of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he says, the house of Hashem. But today, other people are there. They put their animals there. They play soccer there. And he says to the British High Commissioner, if God has no house in this world, you want me to have a better house than God? And the British High Commissioner says, I understand, Rabbi, I understand. And he left, and that was the visit. That is very special. I mean, it's not just talking about Rabbeinu Shalom this and much of that. You actually don't want to live in a fancy house because Hashem doesn't have a house in this world. That's like the real thing. It's like really doing for HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this case. Okay. So I would like to tie together, we just went out of Tisha B'Av, we're going to Elul. I want to tie together a Purim and Tisha B'Av Yesod. Purim, what does Purim have to do with Tisha B'Av? So let's talk about it. Two questions to start with. First one, a very famous question. The Megillah says, Mordechai was the Ish Yemini, he was the Ish Yehudi. Who was he? Was he Ish Yemini? Was he Ish Yehudi? What was he? Was he from the tribe of Yehuda? Was he from the tribe of Binyamin? That's a famous question. Everybody answers. Everybody has different answers. That's question number one. We're going to come back to it. Question number two. When the Shvatim come and stand before Yosef HaTzadik, and Yosef HaTzadik manipulates the situation that Binyamin finally comes to him. And Binyamin is finally standing in front of his brother. And Yosef HaTzadik looks at Binyamin and he says to him, tell me, it must be nice having brothers who care about you, right? It's gavaldik. So geschmack. Binyamin says, yes, it's very nice. He says, tell me, how old are you? Binyamin tells him how old he is. Are you married? Yes. Do you have children? I do. Baruch Hashem. How many? A bunch. What are their names? And Binyamin says, Echi and Roish and Erd and Chupim and Mupim. And these are funny names. And he says, where do these names come from? I've never heard names like this. And Binyamin tells. So we're going to come back to this. What are these names? Imagine we take these names, great names from the past, we bring them back, you get married, you have twins, you call them Mupim and Chupim. Mupim and Chupim Goldberg, it has a very nice, right? Why don't we should bring these names back? So what's pshat with the names Binyamin called his kids? So now the Gemara in Megillah tells us a very interesting discussion between Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and his Talmidim. And the Talmidim come and they ask their teacher, why was it that the Yidden living the time of the Purim story were chayav to be destroyed? What did they do that was so bad? Everybody asks themselves this question. What was so bad? What did they do that was so bad? So Shimon Bar Yochai answers them. Why don't you tell me? He's a good rabbi. He says, why don't you tell me? You must have given some thought to this question. Why don't you tell me? So they said because the Yidden enjoyed themselves at the Suda of Achashverosh. So he says to them, okay, that explains why the Yidden of Shushan were chayav to be destroyed. But what about the Yidden of the rest of the world? What did they do that was so bad? So the Talmidim didn't know. The Gemara says Talmidim don't know, and they said to the Rebbe, you tell us. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, you tell us. So he says, I'll tell you why. And it's a very interesting answer. And the reason why the Yidden of the whole world were chayav to be destroyed, with merited destruction, is because they bowed down to the statue of Nebuchadnezzar many years earlier. It's on a glance, it seems like one thing has nothing to do with the other. So what was the background? 45 years earlier, Nebuchadnezzar erects a statue in the valley of Dura. And he orders all the population of the world to come and bow down to the statue. And Nebuchadnezzar was king of the world. And everybody had to come. And they all come. And all of the Yidden bow down. All of the Yidden, except for 3 people, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, do not bow down. And they refuse to give in to the pressure. So the Talmidim say, wait a second. If Klal Yisrael bowed down to the statue, they should have been completely destroyed. For real. Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu agree to drop the charges? If they did something wrong, punish them. If they didn't do something wrong, what are we talking about it now, 45 years later? Shimachai says, no, they didn't really mean it. They didn't really mean it. They were faking it. They were pretending. Because of the danger of disobeying Nebuchadnezzar. So Hashem also pretended. He took it to the threat level and he stopped. Let's make Seder. I don't understand. What is the fact the Jewish people bowed down to a statue 45 years before the Purim story have to do what's happening in Shushan 45 years later? Ma kesha. What's the connection? What kind of an answer is Rav Shimon Bar Yochai giving his Talmidim? And if the Jews who bowed down to Nebuchadnezzar's statue didn't really mean as a way to Zara, why does Hashem threaten them with total annihilation 45 years later? What's going on over here? What kind of an answer is this? So in order to understand what's going on, we need to take a step back in time to look at the Gullus that began 70 years earlier. What did the Jewish people look like at that point? So fortunately for us, we have a poignant verbal portrayal in Tehillim that explains exactly how Klal Yisrael looked when this was all going down. Right? If you look at chapter 137, Al Naras Bava, right around this time of year, everybody in every camp sings it, Al Naras Bava, before benching. We all remember the words. It's mamash a description of Klal Yisrael going into Golus. That's what 137 is. By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept as we remembered Zion. There on the willow trees we hung up our harps. For there our captors asked us for songs. Our tormentors for amusement said, Shiru lanu mishir Tzion, sing us the song of Tzion. And the people respond, Eich noshir eshir Hashem alad masneichor. How can we sing the songs of Hashem afar? And by the way, why? How? Why not? We won't. How? Because the Mefarshim tell us they were the Leviim who broke off their thumbs and they said, sorry, we can't do it. We have no thumbs. You want us to play? How can we do it? We have no thumbs. So there you have it. An absolute refusal to come to terms with an alien land. That's what was going on over there. In the words of Al Naras Bavel is Klal Yisrael saying, we will never forget Yerushalayim. That's what it is. It's at that great moment, Klal Yisrael took a shavua that has become the hallmark of every year. It has accompanied us through Galus. At every wedding, we say these words. Imeshkechech Yerushalayim tishkach yamini. If I forget you, Yerushalayim, may my right hand forget its skill. May my tongue cling to the roof of my palate. If I do not remember you, if I do not set Yerushalayim above my highest joy. A ragged, disoriented nation engulfed by sadness and anguish over the loss of their beloved Beis Hamikdash, fearing they lost the love of Hashem forever. They're in an alien place, not a home, and they will never, ever make peace with their newfound reality. Fast forward 70 years, and what do we have? Fast forward 70 years, the Yidden are sitting and enjoying themselves at the party of Achashverosh. And there's something original about this party. What's original about this party, everybody? It's a theme party. This party is a theme party. Today it's a normal thing. It's a makubal to have themes at parties. Hello Kitty, chveis, whatever it is that you're, whatever your kids are into at that time. Chveis, baseball, I don't know, whatever your theme is. It's a theme party. You walk into the party. The band is dressed like Levium. The waiters are dressed like Kohanim. The king is sitting, he's wearing the big day of the Kohen Gadol. On every plate, there's a little menorah made out of chocolate, and a little shulchan made out of jelly, and a little kior made out of marzipan. Little party favors. It's very nice, very geschmack. And Achashverosh is celebrated because according to his calculations, 70 years of the Babylonian exile came to an end. And Yirmiyahu was wrong. And the Yidden are never going back there to Israel. And the king and the Haman sat down and they were celebrating. Now I'm going to ask you a question. Anybody in this room have relatives who went through the Holocaust? Anybody here? Yes, I see one. Yes, two. Many people. How long ago did the Holocaust happen? 70 years ago. Now, if you go to a party and you sit down at the plate, there's a little gas chamber made out of chocolate or a little oven made out of jelly. How are you going to feel about that? Not so good. I think you would get up and leave. But you say, well, but it was 70 years ago. So long. It's not so long. 70 years ago. We remember it like it was yesterday. There were people alive today who were there 70 years ago and remember it. So how did we go from Eich Nosh V'Shir Hashem Al Admas Neichor V'Meshkechei Yerushalayim Tishkach Yemini to sitting at a party where the whole theme of the party was we're never going back to Eretz Yisrael? How did that happen? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. And that's what I mean by the first theme party. What's going on over here? So Shimon Bar Yochai's students aren't just referring to the Yidden who lived in Shushan because the Yidden of Shushan are representative of the Yidden of the whole world because nobody wanted to go back. Everybody was very happy and comfortable. They said, what, we're going to go back to Eretz Yisrael? It takes 20 minutes to heat up hot water for a shower? Forget about it. We're staying right where we are. Nobody wants to go back. They made peace with their exile. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai adds the following line. He says, what you're saying is true. This was the cause for HaKadosh Baruch Hu was threatening them with complete destruction. But when, he asked, this is the question you have to always ask yourself. It's a Brisker question. Where's the Nakuda where it all began? Meaning, they left Eretz Yisrael. They cried. They're never going to forget Eretz Yisrael. But now, 70 years later, they're at a party with, the whole theme of the party is they don't want to go back. So when did that happen? Where's the point where it changed? Says Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, when did the disdain for the past begin? At what point did the Jews go from crying over the destruction of Beis HaMikdash to enjoying such a party? What was the error that began the process of alienation from Eretz Yisrael? What was the compromise? There's always a compromise. What was the compromise? What can we point at and say, that's when it all began? And the Talmidim didn't know. It says, Rabbi Shimon, I'll tell you where. I'll tell you where it happened. I'll tell you where the point of compromise was, where the tragic error was. The problem started. The shift in the Jewish mindset began at the time the Jewish people bowed down to the Nebuchadnezzar statue 45 years prior to the Purim story. That's where it all began. If you're searching for a turning point, for a fatal error, for a point of compromise, that's it. And I want you to picture the scene. We're going to describe the scene, everybody. The Yidik emerges from Nebuchadnezzar's palace. You're listening to the radio one morning, it's 6 o'clock, the news comes on, beep, 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 beep. You're listening to the voice of Bavel. The reporter speaking for the palace. Nebuchadnezzar has ordered every single member of the empire should go to Dura and prostrate himself before his statue on pain of death. If you don't do it, you're going to be killed. Imagine you hear that on the news in the morning, you hear the radio and out of the White House, imagine you hear such a thing. What do? There's a statue erected in Wisconsin. Everyone has to go bow down to it. What are you going to do? So what did Jews do? So of course, immediately the Jews of Bavel run to their Rabbanim. They run to their Askanim. What should we do? How do we handle this situation? Immediately they go and they ask advice, instruction, halachic, shayas v'tshuvas, what do we do? And the Rabbanim begin to write Shilas Teshuvas of how to deal with the situation. The RCB, Rabbinical Council of Bavel, meets to discuss the challenge facing them. The Orthodox Union of Babylonian rabbis comes together to deal with the crisis. The Babylonian Jewish Council is convened for a giant meeting of all organizations. What to do? Jews around the world look to their leaders for guidance. Out come the Piskei Halacha of the day. And I quote, the RCB, the Rabbinical Council of Bavel, bowing down to the Nebuchadnezzar statue is mutter, it is not avodah zarah. The BJC, the statue is a glorification of the king, it is not avodah zarah. On the contrary, the law of Dina the Machusa Dina applies, it's a mitzvah, go bow down, gewaldig. And so on and so forth. What makes it all the more interesting is the fact that Shem Echad does not disagree, he doesn't disagree with the Psak Halacha. He doesn't say they're wrong. But that wasn't the issue. What was the issue? The issue wasn't whether it was mutter to bow down to the statue. There were 3 individuals walking the streets saying over our dead bodies, we won't bow down to this thing, whatever you want to call it, avodah zarah and darta, licorice, call it what you want, we're not bowing down to it. Why not? It's not avodah zarah, right? The Rabbanim said no, it's not the issue. We will not bow down. We will not prostrate ourselves in front of anything which is reminiscent of avodah zarah. All we care about and fear is a Kadosh Baruch Hu and Shemayim, and we will not compromise with the realities of Galus. I quote the Babylonian Jewish press's response to their fanatical stance. Those 3 are Kanoim, said the BJP. Babylonian Jewish Press, those 3 are Kanoim, and as such do not represent the Jewish community. We do not agree with them, we do not concur with their judgment, we do not condone their actions. They are fanatics, and as such they do not represent the mainstream of the Jewish people. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah do not care what everybody says. They do not listen, not even for a second, and they were thrown into a burning furnace. And a miracle occurred, and they were saved. Says Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, the moment the Jewish people made the collective decision to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's statue, it was the beginning of the end. We had been granted heterim, it was true. Leniencies are allowed to bow down. It's not avodah zarah, but being willing to bow down to something other than a Kadosh Baruch Hu means you're allowing yourself to forget what a Kadosh Baruch Hu means to you. That's what it means. You're allowing the relationship to rust and tarnish. And that's the beginning of the end. It's a fatal compromise. It means you have decided that Bavel is now your own and native land. That's what it means. And by the way, again, you're not going to get punished. You're not going to get punished for bowing down to the statue because it's not avodah zarah. But don't be surprised if you end up at a party 45 years later where the theme is you're not going back to Israel. Nobody's punishing you for what happened. But don't be surprised, don't be shocked afterwards that you ended up over there, because there was a moment where you compromised. And when you compromise on something, it always ends up somewhere else. That's the way it is. That's the way of the world. When we compromise on something small, we end up down the road compromising on bigger things. As I get this. Rav Shner Kotler spoke at a dinner in Toronto many years ago, and he said the following line. In Numen von Tat, in the name of my father Rab Aaron, he said, the Yeshua for Adar, the salvation of a generation, can nor kommen durch der, can only come about through someone, was nicht overgewen der Chet Adar, who wasn't together with those who committed the sin of the generation. Und das is given Mordechai HaTzadik in Shushan Abira, and that was Mordechai HaTzadik in Shushan Abira. Mordechai lo yichriv lo yishtach, he didn't bow down. The same thing as history repeated itself. The same andarta, the same thing. It's not avodah zarah. It is. It's not. It is. It's not. It doesn't matter. It's not the point. I will not compromise. That's the vort. How come he's not prepared to bow down to when Ganz Klal Yisrael gave in? Why is he not willing to do it? It was as if Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah had returned back to Shushan. Mordechai was exhibiting the same exact behavior. He refuses to bow down. He won't consider bowing down to anyone other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's nothing to talk about, nothing to consider, only HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that was why Mordechai was the only person capable of saving the Klal Yisrael and leading them to redemption. Because Mordechai was the only Jew in the whole nation who did not compromise himself in any way. Let's go back to what we asked. And the Megillah says, Ish Yehudi Oya B'Shushan Abiro Shemai Mordechai Ben Yair Ben Shimi Ben Kish Ish Yemini. Here is an inherent contradiction. Is he Ish Yehudi or is he Ish Yemini? What is he? And the Gemara gives us a number of answers. But we can answer, Mordechai HaTzadik was the one man, the sole individual in Shushan who remained faithful to the Shavua taken by the rivers of Babylon. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, may I forget my right hand, my Yemini. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, Eshkechechi Yerushalayim, Tishkach Yemini. Mordechai was the kind of person that if you asked him how he feels, he would say, not good. There's no Beis HaMikdash. You would say to him, can you sing a song for us? He would say, I can't. How can I sing? There's no Beis HaMikdash. For him, Shushan was nothing and never anything more than an exile. It was a fancy exile, it was a comfortable exile, but it was nothing more than that. And he would never make peace, and he would go back to Yerushalayim eventually with Ezra and Nehemiah. He was an Ish Yemini, a man who would rather forget his right hand, his Yad Yamin, than forget Yerushalayim for a second. What about the other question we asked? What about the question we asked? What Yosef HaTzadik is sitting with his brother, and he says to him, my brother, he doesn't say my brother, he says, Binyamin, Tzadiko, how does it feel to have brothers who love you so much? He says, feels pretty good. Tell me something. How many? Are you married? Yes. You have children? Yes. How many? A bunch. What are their names? Naaman, Eichi, Rosh, Mupim, Chupim. He goes, what kind of names are these? So he says, I'll tell you, he says. Binyamin says, I'll tell you, your majesty. I once had a brother. He was such a good brother, he taught me how to play Kogelach. He learned with me Mishnayos. He introduced me to butterflies. Mamash, a great brother. He took me around. He took me to Pirchei Shabbos afternoon. Such a great brother. And then one day he went to look at other brothers and he disappeared. And you know what? I miss him so much. Can you imagine he's telling this to his brother. I miss him so much and he doesn't know. It's unbelievable. He says to him, you know what I did? So I decided I'm never going to forget my brother. So what I did to never forget, every child that I had that came along, I gave him a name to remind myself of part of an episode of my life that my brother wasn't there for. What is chupim? I wasn't at my brother's chuppah, my brother wasn't at my chuppah. That's chupim. And you can go through, you can look it up in Rashi. Rashi goes through all the names. That's the midah of Binyamin, to never forget what you're supposed to remember. To walk out of here with the idea to take it a step further for us, for the people we know, for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for Eretz Yisrael, to not give in, to not compromise, to be a person who doesn't compromise. That's a tremendous goal. That's a tremendous goal. So I want to tell you, we have a little bit of time left. I want to tell you a story. So I don't know, many of you probably read a book called Incredible. And this, a few years ago, I stood here and I talked about this book before it came out. Little did we know where this book would go. The whole world would be talking about it. Baruch Hashem, everybody. It's a tremendous book. But the Maisa, Rabbi Wallace came to me and he said to me, listen, I want to do another book. And I said to him, Rabbi Wallace, I think we really covered it. I think we really did it, you know? Why another one? He says, no. There's certain things you left out. I said, I left them out for a reason. He says, yes, but I want you to put them in. I said, but Rabbi Wallace, we put them in. You might not look so good. He says, I know, but I want people to hear the Yesod that I'm bringing out. I'm bringing out certain Yesod, and I want people. I said, and he insists. And I'm like, I don't think it's a good idea. He's like, no, I want you to do it. Kids are back and forth. If you know who he is, you know there's really no saying no to the man. So, Baruch Hashem, we're finishing it up. Second volume, incredible, the missing years. But I want to tell you, based on the time we have left, one tremendous Yesod, maybe another one. We'll see if we have time. So this is going back to Rabbi. He told me the following, and this is also going along with our theme of taking it to the next level, of taking it a step further, of not being willing to compromise, of appreciating a person and going the extra step. What do I mean? So he says, I became frum, and now I realize when he became frum, everything he learned, he took it like literally. He learned, let's say he learned in a shir, a yid has to have svarm in his house. He took his station wagon to the svarm store. He told the guy in the svarm store, take any sefer a Jewish house needs and put it in my station wagon. And the guy comes like the best sale he had the whole year. Shas, Shulchan Aruch, Torah. Like he barely reads Hebrew. He's like he barely knows anything. And he's like the guy, anything he understood that you have to do. So he did everything. Ben Am Makom. Ben Am Makom, he's good. But what about Ben Am Chaveira? There it's not so simple. What if you hurt somebody? What if you don't remember what you did? He says to me, I need you to stress this because it doesn't matter if you're not from, if you're from. You have to make amends for what you do in life. It's not okay. They say, you know what? I made a mistake 20 years ago, so it's fine. It's not fine. He says, I wasn't from, I didn't know, but when I learned what to do, that's it, I had to do it. So what does he do? He sits down in his house and he makes a list of all the people you need to ask mechila from. I'll give you a few examples. When he moved into his house in Ranana, so it was a construction zone. A lot of houses were being built at that time. And he says, I want to build for my children a basketball court in the backyard. I don't have time to go to the store to buy cement. But a few houses down, I see there's somebody building a house, and they leave all these bags of cement over there. So I said, I'll just go there one night and take a bag of cement. What's the big deal? And I did. I went there. I wasn't from. I didn't know. I went and I took a bag of cement and I came back to my house to build a basketball court. Derech Agav, I interviewed Rabbi Uri Zohar for the introduction, which I wrote when they re-released his book. My friends, we were robbed. We did a little mini bio of his life. The same thing happened to him. If you're not from, you don't understand. What's the problem? Why shouldn't I take something? He was in someone's house and, there was like this miniature thing on a table and walking out the door. He said he liked it, so he took it with him. Like, why not? And his wife said it. She showed it to his wife. Look what I took. And she said, excuse me, go put it back. He said, no, why should I? Like, everything belongs to everyone. It's a communist world. She said, if you're not going to put it back, I'm going to sit down in the road right here, and I'm not going to move, and the newspaper reporters are going to come, and everyone's going to talk about the fact that he's like, fine, I'm going to put it back. But it's much harder to put it back than it is to take it. He did it, though. But that's the point. If you're not religious, Rabbi Wallace says, okay, I took the bag of cement, I bring it to my house, and I built a basketball court. Fine. But I don't know who the Kabbalah is. I don't know who the guy is. I took whose cement is it? How am I going to give it back? I don't know who it was. Another thing, across the street from my house is a pardes. It used to be pardesim all over Eretz Yisrael. Today you can barely find pardesim. Everything's building. But back then in Ranana, across the street from his house, a big pardes of oranges and very gishmak. And he would sit with his family on the veranda at night, and with some guests, and then he decided, I want a fresh orange. Nothing more geschmack than a fresh orange right off the branch. You can't get fresher than that. So he goes across the street, climbs over the little fence, and pulls down 10 oranges. Over the years, he doesn't even know how many hundreds of oranges he took to his friends and his family and his guests. And he wants to pay back. And he doesn't even know who owns the orchard. Another thing, when it came to tiling the basketball court, in front of his house, they were tiling the sidewalk at that time. So there was a bunch of tiles sitting there for the next day. He took 15. He needed to tile the court. And now he says, okay, I took this guy's tiles. I need to give it back. I didn't know. I wasn't from. Now I'm from. I have a yarmulke on my head. I need to pay it back. So he wrote the guy down on the paper. Okay, bag of cement. I don't know who the guy is. 350 oranges. Don't know who I have to pay it back to. Sidewalk contractor. Don't know who he is. He says, I once went with my friends to a bar. A bunch of my friends. We got a beer together. And the guys loved the mugs. They were these beautiful mugs. He says, he was such great mugs. And they kept on saying, what nice mugs. So I just slipped them into my trench coat. When we got back into the car, I said to all my friends, I like you so much. Here's a mug for you. Here's a mug for you. I have to now go back to the bar. I have to find out where they sell mugs. How am I going to do it? He makes a list. Everything on a piece of paper. Writing it down. Everything has to be paid back. So he's saying, I put it on my refrigerator in my house to remind me. I don't know how I'm going to do it. And there's another side. You don't have to know how you're going to do it. You just have to start. You don't have to know everything. And when it comes to many projects, I don't have to tell you, everyone in the world, in Ruchnius and in Gashmius, you start a project, you don't necessarily know who the people are going to be in the project. The components. You start the project, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends you along the way. He doesn't know what he's going to do. Anyways, he says, I'm sitting in my house one morning, and I have a friend over, and he looks at this list on the refrigerator. He says to me, Yossi, what's this list? So I said to him, I got to tell you a funny story. Many years ago, I wasn't religious. Man, not that many years ago by that time. I wasn't religious. And I did a lot of things which I'm not so proud of today. And there's people I hurt, and I need to pay back these people. He says, no, you know who they are? He says, no. So what are you going to do? He says, I don't know. But I'm going to write it down on a piece of paper, and I'm going to actually do my best. I don't know how. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to pay him back. How? I don't know, but I'm going to do it. It's not enough just to make peace with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I need to make peace with people I hurt. You know, how many people do this? It's such a huge thing. Everyone in this room, we all have things we need to make amends with people. It's not enough. We're from people. But we all have things, and he's the guy I became from. He's like, I have to make it happen. I have to be mashlim, all the things. Anyways, he says they go out of the house, him and his friend. They get in the car, and we drive out of the parking lot, and there's a truck blocking his car. They drive out of the driveway, this truck, and he's not a guy with a lot of patience. He starts honking at the truck to move. The truck's not moving. He's honking at him, move, get out of the way. The truck's not going. He says, and as I'm looking at this truck, he says to me, I suddenly noticed there's a logo on the truck, which looks familiar. So I get out of the car, I go over to the window of the truck, I say, guy, get your window down, and I said, let me ask you a question. 10 years ago, did you build a house 2 houses away? He says, yes. So you're a contractor? Yes. Question, what does it cost for a bag of cement? The guy says, I don't sell cement. He says, I didn't ask you if you sell cement. I asked you what it costs for a bag of cement. He says, I don't sell cement. Rabbi Wallace says, I didn't ask you if you sell cement. I asked you what it costs. He says, why do you want to know? He says, because I wasn't always from. But recently I became from. And since I became from, I want to pay back people I did some harm to. And it happens to be I took a bag of cement from the yard over there when you were building the house. He says, you're crazy, the guy says to him. What are you talking about? He says, I wasn't from. Now I have a yarmulke on my head. Now I want to pay back. How much was it? The guy says, okay, it was this and this amount. He takes out his checkbook, writes him a check. Here you go, thank you very much. And as he's talking to the guy, he tells me, crazy thing, he sees an old man walking across the street. He runs over to the other side because he has a feeling inside him that he knows who this person is. And he goes over to the old man, he says, excuse me, by any chance, do you own this paradise? Do you own this orchard? He says, I do. And Rabbi Wallace says, okay, great. How much does it cost for 10 oranges? He says, I don't sell oranges. We sell to factories. He says, I didn't ask you. I just want to know what it costs. I can make a cheshbon. He says, what are you talking about? He says, well, to be honest with you, for the last 10 years, I feel a little bad telling this to you. For the last 10 years, every time I've been sitting on my veranda at night and I was in the mood for a fresh orange, I would cross the thing, jump over the fence, and over the years, it's probably a few hundred oranges that I took with you. He says, you think I don't know people take my oranges? The whole neighborhood takes my oranges. He says, I know, but I wasn't from, and now I am. I have a yarmulke on my head. I want to pay you back. What do I owe you? He says, I don't understand. You're a crazy man. He says, maybe so, but what do I owe you? He says, okay, let me make a cheshbon. Okay, very good. Give me a check for this. Okay, takes that. Here you go. Thank you very much. Pleasure doing business with you. He goes back to the car to his friend sitting there. He says, you see, that's the way it works. You start. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to help you, but you have to want. You have to want to go above and beyond. You have to want to go above and beyond for HaKadosh Baruch Hu for people. He says, how am I going to find out where this guy, the guy who owns the guy who was the contractor for the sidewalk of Ranana, how am I going to find out? So he goes to City Hall. And he comes to the clerk in the engineering department. And he says to him, do me a favor. Please go check your records from 10 years ago. Who was the contractor for the sidewalks on this and this streets of Ranana? The guy says, seriously, you have nothing better to do than to come and bother me about this now? He says, here's 200 shekel. Go and look in the engineering department, in the plans, and come back to me with an answer. He comes back to me, he says to him, his name is so-and-so, he lives in Netanya. I think he's retired now. Rabbi Wallace drives to Netanya. The guy lives in a high-rise building in Netanya, and he goes and he takes the elevator up to his apartment. He knocks on the door. And the guy comes to the door. He's a little Yemenite guy with a kippah sruga, and he says to him, can I help you? Rabbi Wallace says, yes, I think so. Are you a contractor? Yes. Were you the one who built the sidewalks in Ranana about 10 years ago? He says, I did. Do you remember coming to work one morning and there were 15 of the sidewalk tiles missing? He says, I do remember. It was terrible. It ruined my job because you can't just buy individual tiles. The guy, whoever took them, what a terrible person. He says, I took them. You're a terrible person. I can't believe that. He says, I know it's terrible, but I wasn't from, and now I am. I want to pay back. How much do I owe you? He says, I cannot believe what a crazy person is in front of me right now. He goes to the house, he calls his kids, he says, I want all of you to come over now to meet this crazy guy who's sitting in my living room. And all the kids come over, and he says, guys, meet this person who stole from me 15 tiles 10 years ago, and they say he stole from you, call the police. He says, no, he wants to pay it back. How much does it cost? And he wrote him a check for a few thousand shekels, whatever it cost, and he said to his kids, this is what it means to do teshuvah. He found the mugs, he paid this, he paid back, he paid it all back. He says to me, and I said to him originally, why put this in? Why put this in? Rabbi Yossi, why? He says, no, I'm not embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed. We all have things like this. Every single person has things that we need to go above and beyond to pay back. It's not enough to just say, I'm from, it's okay. No, it's not okay. If there's something that you did, you need to fix it. You need to fix it. We need to go above and beyond, whether we're Mordechai Tzaddik and Shushan Abira, who's not willing to compromise in any way for a Kadosh Baruch Hu. If we're Hanani, Mishol, and Azariah by Duro, we're not willing to compromise. If we're whoever we are, to go above and beyond. If somebody's there, needs a ride to Shemesh Shabbos, you don't know what he's doing for you. He doesn't know what he's doing for you. You don't know what he's doing. We don't know what we're doing for each other. We don't know who's helping who. Who is helping who? Is the one I'm giving tzedakah to, am I helping him, or is he helping me because he's taking my tzedakah and I'm going to go to Shemayim and I'm going to have money for Shemayim, heavenly money? Who is helping who? So I leave you with that question, everybody. As we go through life, to ask ourselves this question in every situation: who is helping who? And let's go above and beyond. We should be zeichet to go above and beyond within our personal interactions with us, our friends, our families. Ganz Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Thank you so much. Hatzlacha with everything.
Shem Yegin Shirei Torah, Moses Blessing, like to big Yasher Koyach. Rabbi Seltzer for the very inspiring drasha. Rabbi say, who is helping who? When you sponsor a shir in Yegin Shirei Torah, and when you put an ad in the journal to help with Abbatz's Torah of Yegin Shirei Torah worldwide, who knows who's helping who? Take the opportunity. Don't delay. Strike while the iron is hot. Call Yegin Shirei Torah 718-851-8651 or email tapecenter@yeshivanet.com and help us, or we'll help you, or whatever the case may be, and have the great schus. Tonight we'd like to give a big Yasher Koyach to Elam Hashem for sponsoring tonight's shir, Lili Nishmas, Rav Chaim Yitzchak, Ben Rav Israel, Olav Shalom, and for Shalamis Nomi, Bas Rav Gedalia Aryeh, and Chava Bas Aaron Yosef, Aleim HaShalom. We'd also like to give a big Yasher Koyach to Mr. and Mrs. Binyamin Winkler for sponsoring tonight's shir, Lili Nishmas Ochiv, Rav Mordechai, Olav Shalom, Ben Rabbi Rucham Fischel, Zazayin Gesund. Rabbi says CDs of tonight's show will be available shortly. If you're not able to put an ad in the journal or sponsor a shir, then please make use of the pushka on the front table. CDs will be available shortly. Yashakar to everyone for coming. Ruchananya ben Akashem, Rotzak Kadosh Baruch Hu, Lezakis, Yisrael, Afigur Hibel, of Torah Mitzvah, Shenem, Adonai Chofes, Aman Tzidko, Yagdol Torah V'Yader. Thank you.